Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the 2023 Police Civilian Internal Affair Review Commission Annual Summit. My name is Erin Hayes and I'm the current chair of the commission and I live in Ward 2. I'd like to recognize the other members of the commission who are in attendance tonight. Eric Forstrom, vice chair from Ward 4, and a special shout out to Eric. This is his final summit as a commission member after having served for 6 years. Thank you for your service. We have Commissioner Chevelle Webb from Ward 1. We have Commissioner Nancy Rodenberg from Ward 3, Commissioner Sarah Florman from Ward 6, Commissioner Nicole Schellender from Ward 2, and unfortunately unable to attend tonight are Commissioners Jerry Brazier from Ward 7 and Commissioner Rosalind Carroll from Ward 5. Additionally, I'd like to welcome our other city officials in attendance. Mayor Carter is here and will be addressing us shortly. Chief Axel Henry will also be addressing us, Commander Amanda Hugh, Commander Jake Peterson, both from the SPPD, Director Brooke Blakey from the Office of Neighborhood Safety, Deputy Director Beth Commers, and PCIARC Coordinator Sierra Cumberland, both from the Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunities Department. The members of the PCIARC meet monthly to review citizen complaints against St. Paul police officers, review new policy, and engage in training about existing SPPD policies. The commissioners are volunteers. They give their time and emotional energy solely to be of service to their community. It may surprise you to learn that the bulk of this service is not spent in meetings, but in solitude. Every month, we receive complaint files containing 5 to 10 hours of body-worn camera footage, along with hundreds of pages of case notes and statements. It is our task to review this footage and notes and then check the complaints against the department's lengthy policy manual. As you can imagine, ensuring that each complainant gets a full and fair review takes each of us many hours, and that's before we even set foot in the meeting room. I want to take a moment and acknowledge this work and thank the commissioners who have taken on this responsibility. Thank you. I'd also like to highlight a couple of wins that we've had this past year. The first is that thanks to very full and frank conversations between the Commission and the St. Paul Police Department, there's been a concerted effort to engage the Commission in the crafting of policy. For instance, we were able to discuss the new drone policy, as well as upcoming changes to the department's body-worn camera policy during the public portions of our meetings. I hope to continue this partnership for all new policies under departmental consideration. And I further hope that we can begin to use trends from the complaints we receive to revisit other policies and suggest changes rooted in community feedback. Here's another positive development I'd like to share. We saw more cases this year than in the past couple. Now that may not sound like a good thing, but to me, it shows that more community members know about our process, thanks in large part to the outreach efforts that are led by the HERO department. More importantly, it shows that the community is placing their trust in this process. Finally, next month, we'll send 2 commissioners along with representatives from the city, the police department, to the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement's annual conference. And I know, no doubt, that they will return with best practices that we can implement here in St. Paul. But still, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the systemic limitations of the community oversight process in St. Paul. Some of these limits are imposed at the state level, and some are imposed at the city level. But I think it's important to be clear about the constraints under which our oversight process labors. Earlier, I talked about the amount of work that each of these commissioners give to the community, sometimes 20 hours a month. Not one of us is doing this for a paycheck, and that's a problem. Not because I or my fellow commissioners are greedy, but because the lack of compensation serves to exclude many community members who could otherwise make important contributions to our work. Think about it like this. 20 hours of service is half a work week. That's it. A $50 stipend is no substitute for half a week's wages. Until we start compensating commission members for their time and emotional energy, we are limiting participation to those privileged enough to take on an unpaid commitment of this magnitude. In other words, we deny St. Paul a commission that truly reflects its breadth and diversity. Secondly, the process itself isn't sufficiently transparent to complainants and community members. When a complaint is resolved, a letter gets sent to the complainant indicating whether an officer was disciplined or not, and that's all. The letter doesn't state what the commission recommended or whether the chief disagreed, only that the complaint's ultimate disposition. As a matter of fact, even the commissioners don't learn how individual cases resolve. As chair, I'm the only one notified when there is a disagreement, and while it's true and great that when Chief Henry and I meet to discuss these disagreements, we have incredible conversations about the complaint, about the department culture, and about the reasonings behind a disagreement. Yet the current interpretation of the ordinance and state law prevents us from discussing even with other PCIARC members. Opening this process, letting the complainant, the commissioners, and the public at large understand its details and nuances while protecting those details that the law requires us to protect would go a long way toward assuring our community that our system is fair and robust. Of course, making these changes would require adjustments to state law, and therefore I ask our city leadership to include police oversight transparency as a priority in the upcoming legislative agenda. The PCIARC was established in 1993, and it demonstrated St. Paul's leadership in this space. Again, in 2016, it cemented its commitment to fair and transparent oversight with the revisions made to the process. And all of this is laudable, but it's 2023 and there's more to be done. It is time for us to lead again by removing the obstacles that prevent many of our community members from becoming involved with the PCIARC, and we must do what we can at both the state and local level to increase the transparency of our oversight process. Doing so will not just benefit St. Paul, but the entire state of Minnesota. Thank you. And now I would like to, at this time, introduce Mayor Carter to address the summit.
Good evening, Chair Hayes, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Our vast universe of viewers online, thank you for streaming in and tuning in. It's great to be here today, and it's good to share this space and this time with you. It is, there's no more sacred duty of a community. And I don't just say of a city, I don't just say of the police department, but truly of a community, because one of the conversations that I have with people every day is that I don't view our city as a stack of buildings and streets and inanimate objects. I view our city as a family of people, a community of people, a network of people that are responsible for caring for one another. And when I think about those types of spaces, not as a metaphor, but as truly a family of people who are responsible for caring for one another, my mind first goes to my children. And I have a world of obligations and duties to my children. My first duty is to secure their safety every day. And we've talked about this extensively, that when it comes time for, and I make a distinction some between youth and children. When people say youth, I think of like a sea of faceless young people, right? When people say children, I think of names and faces of individual people who I know and who my life is dedicated to their safety and well-being. And when it comes time for us to think about the children of our community, not just the youth of our children, but of our community, but the children of our community, it becomes really obvious really fast that an approach to public safety, an approach to keeping them safe that says we're going to wait until after something bad happens to them and try to race to the scene as soon as possible is going to be woefully insufficient. As in my role as mayor, in my previous role as executive director of the Minnesota Children's Council, Children's Cabinet, and my role before that as a St. Paul City Council member, people would ask me on occasion, building the St. Paul Promise neighborhood, which we're in right now, people would ask me on occasion, Mayor, Council member, Director, what's one thing we can do to fundamentally transform the odds for children and families in America? And I always tell them, hey, I've got an answer. The one thing that I think we can do, the one thing that I think we should do to fundamentally transform the odds for children and families in America and in St. Paul is stop pretending that the task is to identify one thing that we can do to care for our children. Because if you've got children, if you've got parents, if you've got siblings, heck, if you've got a pet, you know, we don't wake up in the morning trying to find the one thing that we can do to care for one another when it's people who we love. We wake up every morning trying to find out everything that we can do to take care for one another. And if public safety is our number one goal, and if we're a family, I'm just saying that we have to have what I think of and talk to my team about all the time as sort of a diverse portfolio, as a full portfolio that has to have people involved who can show up in those moments after something terrible has happened and someone's called 911. And it's absolutely critical for us to both be transparent when we see someone, one of our men and women in uniform who we think has fallen below our standards, and to be transparent and say it out loud when we're proud that our men and women in uniform have risen above our standards. Let me tell you, it's no secret that our community has been through tragedy, has over the last several years, over the last several days. One of the worst parts of my job is the text messages I get from our police chief. I love our police chief. I think we have a fantastic police chief. And every now and then, he has to text message me with some terrible news. We lost a teenager last week. We had 3 other teenagers injured in gunfire. We lost an 8th grader last week. And let me tell you, as heartbreaking as it is to sit in a hospital at midnight with a family who is waiting for their daughter, their teenage daughter, to come out of surgery, as heartbreaking it is to stand in the police headquarters with a mother who is still trying to come to grips with the fact that her daughter is gone. I have to say it in front of our police chief and the director of our Office of Neighborhood Safety, Blakey. It's heartwarming to know that we are a community that possesses the capacity within our police department. We're a community that possesses the capacity within our Office of Neighborhood Safety to care for people, and not just with words, not just with sentiments, not just with thoughts and prayers, but to truly be able to care for people in those most horrific moments that our officers, our social workers, our community workers in those institutions have to provide. Being able to navigate those moments, though, requires trust. And I've long believed, and I'll always believe, that one of our most sacred, and by virtue of being sacred, one of our most fragile public resources is the trust that has to flow between the community members who live in this community, who live, work, and play in this community, and the men and women who serve us in uniform. That trust is a life-saving resource. That trust has everything to do with our officers' ability, our paramedics' ability, our firefighters' ability to show up in a moment's notice and provide life-saving care for us in our community. That's where the PCIARC comes into play. The PCIARC is absolutely critical toward maintaining that trust, toward maintaining the transparency that's required to build that trust and to keep that trust alive. I've learned a couple of things about trust, just in a family, being married, being somebody who's got siblings and parents and other community members who I work with. And one is that trust cannot be built in the dark, which is why our ability to be transparent, our ability to say, like I said, to be able to point at an incident and say, we can do better than that. So, and it's the other side of the exact same coin, to be able to look when our officers provide us incredible, excellent service, and to be able to say, That's service with a purpose right there. That's something that we're proud of. We want to commend this officer. That's important for us to be able to do. And it's important for us to be able to have civilians in our community who step forward and volunteer their time, who give your time, to be able to say, this is important to us, to know that we're stewards of that trust. We're carriers of that trust. We are people who have taken it upon ourselves to say, we're going to act as a bridge. There are other communities, and I know you know this, there are other communities who are stuck in a space that we've gone beyond a long time ago, who are stuck trying to figure out if it's community or police, who are stuck trying to figure out if it's community or enforcement, if it's resources or enforcement, who are stuck in this kind of us versus them phenomenon. And I'm just proud to live in a city where we know that there was never an us and there was never a them, that we are a city of we, that we all are in together, our community members, our young people, our business leaders, our officers, all have to be in that together. One of the reasons I ran for mayor is because I know, I would suggest probably better than any one of my 45 predecessors in this role, what it feels like to be pulled over, to see a squad car behind me, and to know that I wasn't speeding. The conversation that we're having could not be more sacred to me. I know what it feels like to look at a TV and see some horrific thing that our St. Paul Police Department is responding to, and lose your breath because the person you sent to work in uniform today, the person you love and care for deeply, who you kiss goodbye and who you expect to see back home at the end of the day, you know is responding in that incident. And you just have no words, but have to sort of just pray in your spirit for God to protect our officers. Those two truths, to me, guide my approach to this work. Those two truths, to me, are why we cannot be stuck in this juxtaposition of officers or community. That we have to have a space that says we support our officers to do the work in the way. We support our officers to do the work with the transparency. We support our officers to do the work with the accountability. We support our officers to do the support with the resources that we as a community provide to make sure that they can provide the services that we need when we need it in a moment's notice. And we do that work to create those optimal responses that we've talked about, because we know that many of the times when we call 911, that's one of the things that puts our officers and our communities in a terrible position over and over and over again, that many of the times when we call 911, we're calling and about situations, about challenges like mental health crisis, like a housing crisis, like a chemical health crisis, which a set of handcuffs is ill-equipped to solve. That's why those community resources are so critical. That's why those optimal responses are so critical. But let me tell you, none of that could be effective if we weren't all working together. And I just have to bring back around full circle to you, Director Blakey, you, Chief Henry, and say the coordination, particularly that the two of you have led to connect all of these infrastructures that we're building together, has been absolutely key to the outcomes that we're experiencing as a community. I'm going to close and I'm going to say this. Just a couple of years ago, we experienced our community, at least one of our close neighbors, being the epicenter of the global conversation about police-community relations. And one of the things that struck me at the time, that will always continue to be poignant in my mind, is the extent to which we found ourselves oftentimes in our neighboring city and around even our community at some point in time with two sets of people who thought they were in disagreement with one another. And as I listened to folks in this side of the quasi-debate, I'll call it, and as I listened to folks on this side of the quasi-debate, what I heard were people saying, I should have an opportunity to have due process. Nobody should ever rush to judgment against me. To be able to say, hey, listen, like, I deserve an opportunity to defend myself. To say, look, nobody gets to be an instant judge, jury, and executioner. And it's intriguing to me that as I heard some of those staunchest Blue Lives Matter folks saying that about the officer who murdered George Floyd, everything that I heard those folks arguing for the treatment, the consideration, and the due process that officer ought to be entitled to, were things that I would agree that George Floyd ought to have been entitled to as well. Oftentimes we think we're disagreeing with one another. But what ends up happening is the humanistic treatment that we demand for ourselves, our children, our coworkers, our family members, those who we love, we sometimes can forget as a society to extend that to every single individual who we come into contact with. I'm preaching to the choir because if you're in this room, you're not subject to that. But I think it is worth, and I remind myself of that sometimes, I think it is worth a rehearsal. I think it is worth just reiteration of the fact that the reason we're here is because at some point in time, someone decided that in America, we're going to embrace a concept of a civil police force. And we sometimes have a conversation about that as though we call police force paramilitary. And sometimes we talk about it as though it's like military light. My theory, the way I look at this is, a police force is the opposite of a military. A military is here to protect us against them, whoever us is and whoever them is. The St. Paul Police Department is, I believe, obviously that means I overextended my time. But it's about us knowing that there is no us, there is no them, that we're all part of this kind of royal we, that our officers, our PCIARC commissioners, our community members, our city staff, every person who works in our city, runs a business in our city, goes to school in our city, is all in this royal we together. I thank you for being a part of that royal we. If you're in this room, you're a steward of that royal we. You carry it forward for us as a community, and our entire community is grateful and better off because you do. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. I am Brooke Blakey, and I am the collaborator, the orchestrator of the Community First Public Safety-led strategies for the City of St. Paul. I work in coordination with all of my city partners to develop and really have the most comprehensive and coordinated approach to public safety we have here in the City of St. Paul. I'm excited to be here this evening. This is my first annual summit and opportunity to talk about the Office of Neighborhood Safety, the work that we do in collaboration with our St. Paul Police Department, our Hero Department, Public Works, our library systems, our Parks and Rec, and all of the other city entities that we have here to make sure that we provide safe and secure places to work, play, and live at all times. ONS is a little bit over 2 years old here now. We had our inaugural year, and so now we're still in growth and development. And so we're working on what does it look like to be community-led public safety. And it really is to be in places and spaces to make sure that people have an opportunity to have their voices led and heard by people who represent them. So we do have the Neighborhood Safety Community Council, which is just like the PCR Commission. It is members of the community that give their valuable time to help us decide what our public policies that we want to move forward, how do we engage with community, and how do we make sure that we are using our funding priorities and investments in the community the way that they should be done. The ONS is really working on how do we engage, utilizing the research and data that is out there to make sure that we are being those perfect citizens and being able to make sure that they have what they need. So I was tasked with giving, I thought I was going to be on a panel and have conversation because that's what I do well, but I'll continue to just talk for a few minutes on what is ONS, people say. And I say ONS is really that place where people can come and get resources. We wrap around all of those resources that the city has to offer in one place. We walk people through processes, give them warm handoffs to individuals, and make sure that they understand that they feel safe. I spend a lot of time answering questions of, why was this? How do we get there? What's the next step? And I say, if I don't know, I will find you someone that can. I call my city partners. But one of the things that I take pride in is really working with our police department and working with our community. When ONS was first started, people said, what is going to be your biggest hurdle? And if you would have asked me that 2 years ago, I would have kind of said, potentially the police department, right? That's what everybody thought. But I will say, standing here with 2 feet down, that the police department has been one of the biggest allies, has been one of the biggest partners, and we have walked down this road hand in hand with my partner, Chief Henry, and saying, this is how we want to effect change, this is how we want to show up in our community, and that we are part of a team together. Doesn't say we don't have disagreements, doesn't say we don't agree on everything, but the one thing that we do agree on, as he will come and talk about, is getting those gold medals. I've kind of taken his thing, and I'm like, I'll run with it. We do really well at getting bronze medals, but we're really working on that gold medal, which is that prevention and intervention piece. We're making sure that we are using our community-based organizations, and as you heard me say, orchestrating and using them in the ideas in places where they are best served, where they want to be, and who are the right people to be doing the work. And so really what I get to do, which is a great thing, is I get to be in community. I get to help to organize and do those things. And I get to have people who are from the community say, this is how I want to show up. I have officers who are standing next to them saying, I want to learn more. I want to be a part. How do I fix the things? How do I work with the biases that I have? And how about I show you the things about how I am a human and how I engage in my community? So I think that that's one of the best things about that. What is, in theory, does ONS look like? Currently, we're a staff of 5 full-time folks in our office. I have a manager from the Neighborhood Safety Community Council. We have an embedded social worker to really help us facilitate that information. We have a program manager that works with Project Peace. And you say, what is Project Peace? I haven't heard of that. What is that? Project Peace is focused deterrence. We're working with individuals that we know may cause harm or have had harm caused to them. And we really look at how do we intensify and engage those individuals, get them all of the resources that they need. And so we think about resources. Well, that's a whole family resource. So it's not just that one individual. It's the little brother, it's the mom, it's the grandma, it's the kids he goes to school with. How do we engage them so that they don't continue to engage in those behaviors that are damaging to our community? That's the impact. The impact is making sure that we are touching all of the individuals within our community and providing them with the services that we need. What does my work with SPPD look like? It really looks like home. It looks like being in a place, in a space where I'm welcomed. I can walk into the building and everybody says hello. I can be in a place and space. We can have dialogue on what's the next step. They have my back and I have theirs. So that is one of the biggest things about what does my impact and work with SPPD look like. It's an opportunity when we get calls from complainants from PCIARC that say, hey, I need some help. It's coordinating with the staff and saying, these are the resources. It's working with law enforcement to tell them, hey, we have some innovative approaches that we're using here in St. Paul. You might want to deploy them in some other places when we're engaging with individuals that need assistance, walking them through what those things are, and providing next help. It might be housing. It might be looking at different type of mental health resources, all of those different things. So it transcends across all of the things that we do within the city. So with that, I'll give an opportunity to bring up Chief Henry, my partner in this.
Thank you so much, Brooke. Is that too loud? I just want to make sure. Well, it's always interesting when you get to follow 2 really good speakers, and then you can kind of anchor a lot of what you're saying to what they brought up. And so I think it's really important to talk about I want to make sure on the behalf of the police department, I call out what our chair said earlier, which is how important this service is with PCIARC for our community. We're very intentional about the fact that here in St. Paul, we don't think of ourselves as the police department. We view ourselves as your police department. And that process means that we need to be open and always looking at how we can get better and how we make ourselves a better place. You know, the mayor had mentioned the idea that we were somehow the opposite of military. He said he thinks it's the exact opposite thing. And so I'm going to anchor that in a little bit of truth that most people don't know. Sir Robert Peel, who started basically modern city municipal policing in England, picked this color blue as the police uniform. And do anybody in this room know why that is? What from your high school history days was the color of the British uniforms that they wore here in the United States when they came over to this country before we were a country? The red coats. And blue is the opposite color to red. And that was intentional for a reason. He wanted to make sure that the community realized that we were absolutely not the military. That's not what we were. We were actually the community helping make the rest of the community safe. We were not soldiers. We were community members that were serving. So that's one of the things we look at. One of the things I'm very proud with our department is that every contact that we have out there, we are giving out basically a version of a how did I do card. We are the biggest driver in the city of complaints against ourselves. And that's because we know that when you operate in a standard where we're not the police department, where we have to follow a bunch of rules, but we're the police department, we're your police department, that's something we have to live up to. That's something that has a much higher responsibility that a policy or procedure can't capture in completeness. It's something that we need to make sure we're always doing in the best possible way. In the last couple seconds, because I'm sure we want to get kind of back on a timing schedule, I just want to hit on something that Director Blakey said, which I think is really important. Our goal here in St. Paul is not to arrest people. In fact, the very blue uniform I spoke of is proof of that. If we wanted to catch a lot of people doing things, we could all just get in plain clothes and drive around in unmarked cars, and guess what would happen? People would speed past us and do all kinds of things, and we could catch a bunch of people. That's not what we're trying to achieve here. What we're trying to achieve is community safety and prosperity amongst the folks that live here. And so Brooke had mentioned it, but it's one of the ways I try to describe this quite a bit, which is there are really the three big medals we can go after, and the gold medal is prevention. If we can prevent, everyone in this room would much rather have us prevent your house from being burglarized than catch the burglar who did it and get your stuff back. The silver is that what we call the intervention, or kind of moving it around. Maybe someone's drifting down the wrong path. We kind of get them pointed back in the right direction, and that's those silver medals. And we love earning those too. Enforcement is the bronze. Really, at the end of the day, if we have to arrest our way through a solution, the best we're going to get out of this is a bronze medal. And that's how we look at everything we do. Now, as Brooke said, we get a lot of bronze medals sometimes. But our goal is always that gold medal. And if not the gold, it's always that silver. And we don't get there as a police department policing the community. We get there as a community working together to police itself. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Oh, if they're not going to use all 8, let's fill from the left, or from that side. I don't know how many we have. Podium side. Podium side, yes. Oh, leave again. Just the two of us?
Just the two of you.
Why are we sitting over here?
All right, so I will moderate and ask questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions that they want to start off with?
And you could go behind the podium.
All right.
Go ahead and just repeat the questions for us, Aaron.
All right, does anyone from the audience have any questions that you are interested in knowing?
Can you give us an example about, a very specific example about how your departments have responded together?
The question, just to repeat into the microphone, the question was, do you have a very specific example of a time when your departments collaborated?
Yeah, so Brooke had spoke about the Office of Neighborhood Safety, and one of the things I will say about that is when we've been asked about other departments and other places in the country have asked about how you could get something off the ground that we're building as we fly it. I said, the first thing you have to do is you have to get somebody like the Office of Neighborhood Safety. We're just lucky we have one here. And so really how that plays out is, and I won't mention the super unique specifics of the event, for obviously these are open cases and they involve juveniles and things, but we had a case here, we've had a number of cases, but the case I'm speaking of was a young person that was involved in a shooting and had committed some very serious crimes of violence. And so our police department responded to that and ended up making an arrest, and that led to the recovery of some weapons and some other things. Well, in the midst of that, it also revealed that a bunch of that young person's friends were also involved in kind of the same activities that were going to lead them down that same road. And where Brooke comes in and her team comes in, we work hand in hand. Literally, she gets information quicker than I get it as the chief of police, but through our gang and gun unit and through our homicide unit. But came in, was able to, in real time, come in and talk with those kids, talk with those family members to say, listen, this is happening, that can't be undone, but we don't want to see you go down that same path. And those kinds of success stories are happening literally every day. We have a system, a referral system, where we're very clear about how when something happens, we communicate in real time, literally back and forth, sometimes 2, 3 in the morning. We're having those conversations. But that one event is a real event that happened, but it's one of literally hundreds at this point that we've been cooperated in, and it's been very successful.
If I were looking to connect with someone in the Office of Neighborhood Safety, but I didn't want to go through the police department to get resources, how would I make that connection to your office?
So we have I don't know if it's on, but anyway, I'll just talk. Okay, so we are located on the city website, and you can direct for referral into the Office of Neighborhood Safety. It is a phone call, and then we do basically what's a needs assessment. So we're like, what are you calling about? What are the basic needs? And so we have had that. We've had some community members call in and say, my son or daughter is engaged in X, Y, and Z. I need some resources, or we have a real good connection with our St. Paul Public Schools and working with them, and they do a lot of the referral basis. But what generally happens is we have a website, you call in, we have voicemail, and then we just kind of walk through what that process is, and then working with our enterprise resources within the city. We say, this is what we need, and then we talk about, is this something that you're hoping for? What is your outcome? And then connecting them with that service, and then having that warm handoff. That's the important part, is making sure that it's not just like, okay, call this number, that's next, because we have found that doesn't happen. People really, when you don't have a relationship. So I spend a lot of time making relationships with individuals so that when I call, I can say, this is an individual that I've worked with before. These are some of the resources, knowing where those resources are, and then making sure that the folks that are supposed to be providing those additional resources are actually doing that. So there's some follow-up to that and continuation from there, yes.
Great, thank you. My fellow commissioners will know I always come with questions, so I'm going to make sure to keep checking. Did I see a hand back?
So this is for the chief. You made mention of your blue uniforms quite a bit. What color are your SWAT uniforms?
The question was the blue uniforms that officers wear, what color are the SWAT uniforms?
Our SWAT tactical team typically, for the most part, wears this uniform. They do also have a kind of a more military, what the military refers to as a BDU, which is a battle dress uniform. It's the kind of cargo pants that kids wear, but it's that color uniform.
Camouflage, right?
Yes.
And I saw another hand, Commissioner Rodenberg.
Yes, it sounds a little bit like the center is like a social service community center with a tighter connection to the police. Could you help me differentiate that from some of the traditional community centers?
So the Office of Neighborhood Safety really is taking a global and comprehensive approach. So it's not a community center, and we do provide some direct services, but really what it is a office that really focuses on multiple different, I would say, issues that we have that are surrounding public safety. So we have things that we discuss for like our unsheltered population. So we're working with our Department of Safety and Inspection and our Parks and Rec for things that revolve around safety for our unsheltered community. on both sides of that, when we're seeing unsheltered, but then also providing support to those unsheltered. We do victim services pieces, so and when individuals have things that happen to them, we're there to help assist, make sure they're filling out reparations forms from the state, to make sure that they're getting those resources. We are working with our St. Paul Public Schools when they have incidents, so when kids are leaving school and in the community, or when things happen in the community, we're talking in the schools, vice versa. We spend a lot of time working with our community-based organizations, so we have folks that are deployed within the city to work with our youth, to work with our unsheltered, to work with our those that are experiencing mental health and substance use, and then we also engage in a lot of different things based on the policies and procedures that our Neighborhood Safety Community Council comes up with, so things that they have listening sessions on, and then we work with them to do those types of policy changes, as well as making sure that the resources that are being asked for are provided by our community-based organizations. So it's not necessarily a community center. I would say really what it is about getting all of those collaborative folks under one umbrella, and then being able to make sure that we're utilizing all of our internal resources as well as external to make sure that we're facilitating things to happen in a timely manner and fashion. Thank you. You're welcome.
Deputy Director Ledger.
Hi. We hear a lot of people, and I hear my neighbors talk about crime. What do you think are some of the biggest myths that are out there about this idea of crime in the city, and how do you address them?
And to speak it into the microphone, the question was, what do you think are the myths regarding crime in the city, and can you speak to them?
I don't think that there's myths. I think people have true feelings and thoughts about what they believe are happening in their world. And I think what our job is to really have an opportunity to hear what they're saying, and then answer and give questions and then responses based on what they believe. So I think, we hear about carjackings. That's a big thing that we hear about. We hear about rampant group of youth, running through the cities. We hear a lot about guns and shots fired and things of that nature. And I think when we start to talk about what does that really mean, I think also the advent of Citizens App and things like that, where we're getting a lot of that stuff in real time, and it's not, excuse me, it hasn't been filtered, so it's just people who are reporting things that they think that they've seen or heard, and then it gives people the ideas that this is actually like consistent and happening all of the time. And so I think one of the biggest myths or things is that it's just 24/7, but I think that's because we have access to it 24/7 where we didn't have access to it before. And so really I think a lot of the things that we really engage in is having that conversation, answering people's questions. Are there really carjackings happening on a daily basis? And if they are, why? And what are the consequences or enforcement pieces of that? Or how do I keep myself safe? And safe is relative to what you're experiencing at that moment. What safety looks like here in Rondo looks very different than what safety looks like on the east side, or even across the street in Frogtown, what somebody on this side of University feels versus what somebody on the other side is. And so I really think about, you heard the mayor talk about it, and you've heard the chief talk about it, is about being transparent, but giving people information and really being like, these are the things that are happening, talking about the trends. We've been really integral in beefing up our databases and forward-facing platforms so people can really track those things and see those things, and looking at other data that's not necessarily all police data, and looking at what is actually community data that we're getting from communities, working with like Harvard Policy Research Lab to make sure that we're giving people other data so they can understand like what's happening community-wise, and not just always just relying on police data, because those are things that happen daily, but that doesn't necessarily paint the total picture of what's happening within the community.
Yeah, when someone gives $1 million answer like that, you just let them give $1 million answer. I will say that, I'll give the kind of the grade school version answer that says basically the same thing, and that is that there literally is not a single street in this city that's more bad than good. There is not a place that is that bad in this city. There's not a street in this city I wouldn't build a house on and live on. Now, there are neighborhoods that are challenged. There are blocks that are experiencing some stuff. Sometimes a family moves in, or there's a thing happening in an address that can create problems in a neighborhood and those types of things. But I think probably the issue that can be the most frustrating when you're in a community where we're all really working together is that when folks lose that optimism. And I sit here as the chief of police who deals with a lot of very, very serious topics every day, as the mayor and Director Blakey have alluded to. But I'm extremely optimistic about this city, its potential, and where we're at and where we're not at as far as some things are happening. And so, I push us back to that concept that we do this together. This isn't done by police over-policing neighborhoods or putting armed people on every corner. This is done when community comes together. We work arm in arm, which is what these programs are trying to do to make our community the safe and the most thriving as possible.
Commissioner Webb.
So overall, do you feel like crime is going down or up?
The question is overall, do you feel like crime is going down or up?
So first and foremost, just a disclaimer for everyone in the room and everyone watching at home, I will never end zone dance on reducing crime stats, because regardless of how low they get, there's always still going to be crime, and someone was a victim of that, so we want to be very respectful of that fact. I'm very happy with some of the developments we've seen so far in our shots fired, our shooting calls. They're down over 40% compared to last year. Our carjackings from 21 to 22 went down 50%. They're down another 50% this year. I think our current to-date numbers they were 27 as of about 9 days ago, and I think we had one since then, so we're at probably 28 or 29. That's, again, one of those things I think the public thinks is this big, huge number. Our approach to that has been very specific, so that has really worked well. Sadly, our murder numbers are not dropping the way they should. We've seen anomalies this year in types of crimes. We've had, I believe this year to date, we've had 7 people stabbed to death in our city, which is extremely rare. But also kind of reveals that problem, how dangerous edged weapons are. And our domestic violence homicides have gone up at rates we haven't seen in a while, and so that's obviously very concerning. So there's a lot of good things happening. In general, overall, a lot of the major crimes that you're in there, all the crimes against properties, our auto thefts are down unbelievable rates, but again, they were up way higher than they should have been. Are trending in the absolute right direction, but I'm never going to be happy till they get down to 0.
Yes, in the back.
So I have a question, because it was like about a month and a half ago. It was like late night. I came from work. It was like about 2 a.m. I was actually, my car was in a bar, but like my child and like where I live, my bar was very close. So I was like kind of walking to my car, and then I get in and I drove, and then I forgot something. I went back to my job. And then what happened was there was this guy. He had a gun. Actually, he had like this black jacket. I wasn't able to identify him. And he was like, he saw me, was like, hey, stop, like something like that. I didn't say anything. I hit like to another car on the side. And he kind of looked at me for a while, and then he left. Then I got so scared. I went and called the police, 911. But I couldn't, because I thought that if I could do that, he could shoot me. So in that position, what could the police or the community do about it? Because it's very dangerous.
So the question is, in a scenario where you're concerned about calling 911 and having that result in injury or worse, what should community members do?
Because I'm scared to if I make a sound, shoot, because I have my phone like this using, because I wasn't watching right around. I wasn't aware of anything, And I think he was kind of following me because he wants to take my phone or something. I don't know. It's just kind of, he had that attention coming to me.
So a couple things in relation to that. First off, so sorry that happened to you. It sounds like an awful incident. If you dial 911 from your cell phone, it will go to the dispatch center. And even if you don't say anything and you throw the phone on the ground, leave it on the seat, any of those types of things, it is, as you know, we've all butt dialed someone or something and they can hear what's going on in the background. Secondly, when they do that, they will try to ping your phone, which means they will actually try to figure out where that call is coming from. And now that's some phone services, sometimes a day, that can get you within a block. Type of thing, or very close. Other times it's a lot broader, but at least it's something. What's important, I obviously also embedded in this answer, is that you obviously had a difficult choice to make, and you made the decision, and thankfully you're here to ask the question, that you feared that there would be retaliation if you made an overt call, you openly called the person. And so I would suggest your decision was right in that situation, in the sense that you obviously want to do what's right in the moment. Just like we ask folks to get license plates for us, or if they can, take pictures for us of crimes, but we certainly don't want you to walk out in the middle of the road and do that where everyone sees you and you might get retaliated against. But always, regardless of what happens in that moment, once you get to a point of safety, or once the threat that you're dealing with leaves you, please report those crimes. You could hold, even if it was a person wearing a mask and you knew very little about them, you may hold a little small key piece of information that helps us solve that crime, because that person may have mugged or robbed or done something to 5 or 6 different people, and the last little piece of information you gave us, whether the person had a wedding ring on, or they had an accent, or they I don't know, they had whatever. You could notice they had freckles. Something like that might be that last little key piece that helps us. So I hope that helps out a little bit. I don't know, Brooke, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm always tell folks to call 911 and then really give as much information. I know people, I get that question all the time. I don't want to call 911 because I don't want something else to happen. And so I always err on telling people, please continue to call 911, but being very descriptive in what you're talking about and what you're saying and how you're explaining what you need. So when, people call and say, there's a guy in the street and he looks like he's upset and this is what's happening, and continuing to give all of those best descriptions that you can get versus, I don't want the police to come, because that's not helpful to the individual, it's not helpful to the person on the other end. And so we've really been working with our emergency communication system, having some social workers embedded in there, being able to triage some calls. And as you heard the mayor talk about, as well as the chief, about having community response teams and optimal response teams, or individuals that are responding in coordination with our police department or in coordination with community to make sure that we're providing the right service. So I always say error on calling 911 and giving as much information, because that also helps us decide when we get other resources to those places and spaces. If we don't get phone calls that say things are happening, then we don't know, and then we can't provide resources, because that's the data-driven things that my office is looking for. That's the research that we're looking in. So even if you called 911 and put the phone down, we now have something happen in that area. So we need to talk about what's happening in that area. Do we need to look at different lighting? Do we need to look at how we're cutting the trees? Do we need to look at, what kind of parking restrictions we have? All those things come into play. So it's really important when we call 911 until we get better situated on our data and all of those other things to be able to track those things and make sure that we're getting the resources that we want to that area. Because if no one calls or says anything, then we don't know. You're welcome.
Commissioner Schillender.
What's the future of the SRO program?
The question was, what is the future of the SRO program?
So a lot of that has been a big question as of late because of the change to the Minnesota the law around that. We didn't have SROs in the school when that law changed, so we don't currently have SROs. That's a school board decision that the school board superintendent and the school board is going to have to make about what they want if they want to explore that. Brooke and I are both very committed to working with the school. I would actually state to you that although we don't have formalized SROs in the school, and that's not because of this recent issue, that was something that goes back a few years, I would actually suggest that we probably have the strongest relationship that the city has ever had with the school district. Sometimes there's a little, just for clarity for some folks maybe at home don't know this, it's something our officers sometimes don't even understand, is that the school board and the city are two different things. They both say St. Paul in them, but they don't, like the school, the teachers don't work for the mayor, they don't work for the city, that's its own entity. So we are two separate entities, but I think our relationship right now, and in no small part to Officer Neighborhood Safety and to our Aspire program on the St. Paul Police Department, and to the great work of the SROs that used to be in the schools and are certainly still working with them, is better than it's probably ever been.
And I will say that this summer we had an opportunity to pilot a program through ONS where we had violence interventionists, which are community-based organizations that were in the summer school working side by side with the school districts, community service liaisons, and security support liaisons within the school. And we're looking at how do we expand that and work with those individuals to continue to make sure that we have that option and continue to build on the relationship that those community-based organizations have with some of the folks that work on Aspire and the staff within my department.
Thank you. I want to thank Chief Henry and Director Blakey for your time, for your energy today, for all of the knowledge you shared with us. We really appreciate it and look forward to continuing to work and partner more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I would like to invite PCARC Coordinator Sierra Cumberland up to share the data and process for our annual summit. Sierra.
Thank you, Erin, and good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out and joining us, and for those of you tuning in online as well. My name is Sierra, and I work in the Department of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity. You may also have heard of us as HERO, and I am the coordinator of the PCARC. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of the PCARC process, show you some of the data from the 2022 annual report, and then you'll get to hear from the commissioners themselves. So when a complaint is filed with the City of St. Paul, it can come in either online, in the mail, on email. It is reviewed by Internal Affairs. They take a look to make sure that it is complete. Under state law, a formal complaint requires a signature. It is Internal Affairs who conducts a thorough investigation. They put together a full packet, and those are the materials that Chair Hayes referred to earlier. All those hours of body-worn camera footage, in-car camera footage, dash cam footage, and any other evidence that Internal Affairs collects. The PCR commissioners get together and deliberate that case. They issue recommendations to Chief Henry, and we'll be taking a look at the statistics of what the PCARC recommended in 2022 in just a minute. Under city and state law, Chief Henry currently has the final decision-making authority in this process. And it's important to note, too, that even if discipline is implemented, an officer may be able to appeal that, depending on their employment and union contract. Once that process is complete, the complaint is closed out, and the complainant receives a letter from Internal Affairs informing them if discipline was implemented as a result of their complaint or not. So, as has been discussed, being a member of the PCARC is a big time commitment. And we are so grateful for their dedication. This photo here is of the graduation of the 2023 Civilian Police Academy. This is a training that commissioners go through before they even have the voting ability on the commission. And so they start with the Civilian Police Academy, they do data privacy training, they get certified with Criminal Justice Information Services with the FBI, and they're continuously learning. And that's the training component. As Chair Hayes mentioned, there is also a significant workload that the commissioners do each and every month, reviewing cases, watching body-worn camera footage, and thinking about these cases too. And it's typically not just one body-worn camera footage. It's the perspective of each officer who is on scene. I know they take a lot of time and a lot of intentionality to issue objective and fact-based recommendations to our chief of police. So in 2022, the PCARC reviewed 19 cases. These cases involved 32 officers for a total of 37 allegations. And the reasons we've got those different numbers is that a complaint may involve multiple officers, and it may also involve multiple complaint classifications. For example, a complainant could allege improper procedure and poor public relations in one instance. And so these are the different allegations of the cases that were reviewed by the PCARC in 2022. The most common allegation received was improper procedure. Gotta click over here. Hey, there we go. So when individuals file complaints with the Department of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity, we collect demographic information. And now this information is voluntary. Not all complainants provide it, but this is the data that we did collect. And I think it's interesting. And it also demonstrates that there are some communities that we aren't reaching, that we would like to reach, and we've got more work to do to ensure that folks are aware of their rights. And this is a new section of the 2022 annual report. So the Internal Affairs Unit keeps data each year on the total number of complaints they receive, the complaints they submit to the PCIARC for review, as well as the complaints not submitted to PCIARC for review. As you can see, in 2022, there were 39 complaints received that were not forwarded to the PCIARC for review. And the second table below is a breakdown of why those complaints were not forwarded to the PCIARC. The most common reason is that there was not a violation of policy alleged in the body of that complaint. But yeah, there are a number of reasons. All right. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you go back?
Yes.
I think it's really important what you said. There was no policy violation in the complaint, not that it was not found, so therefore it wasn't sent to PCIARC.
Yeah.
I think making that distinction is important for people to understand.
Thank you, Commissioner Schillender. The comment from the commissioner was that that there is no policy violation in the body of the complaint necessarily, and so it doesn't necessarily undergo the PCIARC and civilian review process. Now, however, I do want to mention that Internal Affairs reviews each and every complaint, and even in complaints that do not go through the PCIARC process, where there are issues found, those are addressed by the St. Paul Police Department. And we will have, as part of our panel, Commander Jake Peterson will be joining us in a few minutes. And so if folks have questions about this data by Internal Affairs or the process, I'm sure he'll be able to share some of his expertise then too. Thank you. So the recommended dispositions that are available to the PCIARC are outlined in the bylaws of the commission. And so we have the list of the dispositions along with their definition. And the most common disposition recommended to Chief Henry was the disposition of sustained in 2022. Similarly, outlined in the bylaws are disciplinary recommendations that are available to the PCIARC. So when a complaint is sustained, the PCIARC also issues a recommendation of what disciplinary action should be implemented. I want to note that retraining is not a standalone, it's an addition, and so it goes along with, for example, a recommendation of oral reprimand. These are listed in the order of progressive discipline. And these are the recommendations that were issued by the PCIARC regarding discipline in 2022. Oral reprimand was the most common. And in 2022, the Chief of Police assigned disposition other than what PCIARC recommended 3 times and departed 5 times from recommended disciplinary action. So that's a brief glance at the data. We have annual reports physically available here, and for those joining us online, we will also be posting the annual report to our website. So I encourage you all to take a look at that. So this is my contact information here. If you are interested in learning more, I welcome you to contact me at any time. At this time, I would like to invite the PCIARC commissioners and Commander Jake Peterson to come up to the front and sit at the table, and we'll welcome some questions from the audience. That way you all can. Does anyone in the audience have any questions to start us off? Yes, Deputy Director.
Can you talk a little bit about the time commitment involved?
Yeah, question is regarding the time commitment involved. Would a commissioner be comfortable digging into the specifics of the time commitment? Commissioner Rodenberg.
It seems like a lot of time, but I find it so interesting that actually it doesn't feel like such a lot of time. But I'd say that if sometimes it can be as little as 5-6 hours when it's a low caseload, but mostly it's more like 15 or so, around there. And that does involve viewing lots of hours of body-worn camera and I sort of think of that like a tiger sleeping. There's a lot of downtime, and then all of a sudden something happens that you had better be paying attention to. So, and that's my statement.
There's also a lot of reading. There's also a lot of reading sometimes, the reports and everything, so.
Can you just clarify, is that 15 hours a week, a month? What is the time frame of that 15 hours?
And the question is that 15 hours a week or a month? What is the time frame? How often? Go ahead.
Well, we typically get the cases maybe 2 weeks before our meeting. And so I work full-time, so I try to gauge a couple hours every night when I know there's going to be a huge caseload, or if I don't have a weekend, a free weekend, if I have one, I'll set aside time to review the cases and read or whatever. But it can go up to 15, 20 hours total with everything.
Yeah, I can say we average, I think, between 4 and 8 cases per month. So it's 15 or 20 hours per month over the course of however long it takes you. And to reiterate what was said earlier, sometimes you're looking at 9 angles of the same incident. You're watching 45 minutes from every possible angle from the 9 officers who were present, reading, 120 pages of police report, and follow-up and email correspondence, et cetera. Sometimes you're viewing, pictures, or you're kind of looking at all of these things, in your spare time, and trying to give it the due amount. And I think, like Commissioner Rodenberg said, it's very much like you're just watching. Oh, okay, here's something. So it's really interesting, but it can be kind of time-consuming.
Thank you, commissioners. So, thank you. Director Nix.
So you mentioned the time commitment. Could a couple of you just share why you think that this work is important and why you kind of dedicate your time on a monthly basis to doing this work?
So the question is, regarding the time commitment, why do you think this work is important?
I will go because it is time consuming, and sometimes you feel like you don't have enough time, but I feel like I'm doing something within my community that might save someone's life. If there's I have Black sons in the community, and if I could avoid them being killed by a policeman or being killed, period. I mean, my family experienced a death in the family at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer in 1973. And so it was important to me, instead of complaining about the police, and thank you, Noel, for grabbing me at golden time and putting me on this, but I think that I feel like I'm really making an impact and not just complaining, the police are not this or that. And before I got on here, I could honestly say I did not get along with cops. And so, not that I have a record or anything, but they just, whatever. But now that I'm involved, there's good and bad everywhere. And I can commend the St. Paul Police, because I do see, like with videos, that they're really trying to be human, and they're not just coming up. They're asking what's the problem. It might be a medication thing, or a person might just have a bad day, and they come in and they really try to bring a humanistic side to policing. So.
I would answer too. I've lived in lots of cities, including our sister city, and including cities all over the United States and in Europe. And this commission that we have is one of the best that I've seen. I've not been aware of an oversight or an engagement that civilians can participate in that is this well run and this long tenured. So it felt like an opportunity to take advantage of participating in my community. And also going back to something Chair Hayes said in her opening remarks, I have the privilege of being able to dedicate 20 to 30 hours a month that I don't need to be using to supply income to my family. I have that privilege, and so I want to make sure that I'm leveraging that in a way that supports the entire community, because I know not everybody has the ability to do that.
I'll just add, for me, it's transparency. That's something that I value in my work and personal life, and kind of see it as one of the most important things of being a good human is transparency. And so the opportunity to really see and understand and hear about how things actually work on the ground was really meaningful to me. And I've learned so much since doing this. And it really provides a perspective that I was needing to have based on what I've seen from the outside, my own personal experiences with law enforcement, the things that you hear in the community, and then really understanding why things happen the way that they do, and then what's done about it is really meaningful.
I'd also like to offer Commander Peterson, as the Commander of Internal Affairs, how do you see the value of the PCIARC?
Sure. Thanks, Sierra. So I've said it to the commissioners, I know, at our meetings, but the discussions that they have are extremely meaningful and poignant and right on task all the time. And I'm constantly impressed by the legal questions that they ask, the policy questions that they ask. They're the same types of questions that we ask of ourselves at the police department. And so it's been a real benefit to us to get their perspectives on things, and we value that very highly. So I'm hopeful they feel the same of our relationship, but I know we value them very highly, and are sad that some people won't be there as long as we'd hoped. But it's very meaningful for me personally and the relationship building, but also for our police department and our community as a whole.
Just to follow up on that, and Commander Peterson, you were talking about this a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about the deliberation process? So you look at all this information, you hear testimony, kind of give us a peek behind the curtain in terms of what that deliberation process looks like to make a determination.
And for the mic, the question is regarding the deliberation process. What does that look like in a meeting?
I can take that one since I run the meetings currently as chair. We start every deliberation by doing what we call a round robin, where every commissioner says just a brief snippet on how they're feeling about the case, if they think it's a sustained case, not sustained, whatever that disposition might be. And we do that purposefully because we want every commissioner to be able to share their thoughts without going into a motion on the table and stymieing some of that conversation. The benefit of being chair is I'm always the last to go, and I often will find myself, as I'm listening to my fellow commissioners give their thoughts on a case, I find myself saying, I didn't think about it that way. I'm gonna change what I say when I come up. So sorry that you all have to go before me, but that's the privilege of being chair. After we do our roundtable, we open up the floor to a motion, and we run a quasi-Roberts Rules process to keep order for the deliberations. And when there's a motion on the table, it gets seconded, and then we discuss. And the expectation during the discussions is we not only talk about the scenario, we look at the policy. Right? So we encourage the commissioners to be looking back at the department policy, noting which policy was violated, how it was violated, and focusing specifically on that case. If a disposition turns out after a vote to be a disposition of a sustained complaint, the commissioners get to see the officer's employment record, and it's very, I'm trying to find the right word. It's not the full employment record. What we see are their list of commendations, and we see previous disciplines, as well as their date of hire. And what that gives us insight into is how is this officer's trend? Are they kind of going on a downward trend? Is this a one-off? And that lets us talk a little bit more in depth about what a potential discipline should be. Then we do a similar round robin. we discuss a motion on the table for a discipline, and we vote, and that's where the case then gets sent back, or the recommendations get sent back to Chief Henry to make his recommendation. Did I leave anything out?
No, I would add, the color commentary I would add is, there's very, very few cases where everybody has the same perspective on things, and that's why there's 9 commissioners, not 2 or 1. And that divergent thinking is valued, and as we've come together, a lot of us joined in the March, like January, March timeframe, we've grown in our comfort level to really push and say, I hear you, I hear your perspective, I do not share it, right? And we come to votes, and sometimes it's more, more people are in the same camp, and sometimes we can't come to an agreement, and that is okay. That's why there's 9.
I'd like to add a thing about process. So I come out of academe, which is noted for not having conclusions to the discussions and much bigger topics. I really appreciate, because this process brings forward all the big topics and issues and problems and complexities in society, and uses a pretty disciplined process to come to a real conclusion. So satisfying to me. Plus the listening to each other. We have to raise our name tags to speak since it's audio recorded, which allows, I think, time for more reflective communication. So I've been very pleased about that.
So I guess this is more toward the internal affairs side of it. Do you issue a recommendation as well, or are you just like submitting your investigation to the PCR?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We complete our entire investigation, and we forward that entire investigation to the commissioners for review. So we do not make any recommendation to them. That is up to the commissioners to come to their own conclusions.
And that was a change that was made to the process in 2016, where the internal affairs investigation used to share, here's what our recommendation is. The community came together and said, no, we want the commissioners to have more of a centered view and community-focused view. So we don't actually see any recommendations that internal affairs would make to us.
And also, I would like to add, there are, I can't think of his name. What's his name at the end? Jake, yeah, sorry. He usually has his commander thing. And I'm old and my memory's going, so whatever. Anyway, there are police officers there to help assist us. We can ask questions about procedure, and that's helpful when we're thinking, maybe this cop is out of line, but he's actually doing his job. So that's very helpful in the process as well.
And I think to piggyback on that, we try not to make any recommendations. We just try to answer potential legal questions. I never want to try to sway about giving them an idea one way or another. We are there more to provide a legal background or policy background if they have a question, which sometimes they do.
Often I do.
Chief Henry.
There's been, I know, so recognizing no one is doing this for the money, there's been some mention about the stipend. Is PCIARC or HERO or anybody looking to maybe address that by changing that?
The question is regarding whether or not there's any discussion happening about changing the stipend that PCIARC commissioners receive.
Would you like to answer?
Welcoming Director Noel Nix to the stage of Mayor Carter's office.
Hi, for those watching through streaming and at home, I'm Noel Nix. I'm the Director of Community Initiatives in the Mayor's office, and in that role, I work with all of the boards and commissions that the Mayor makes appointments to. So this is something that we've heard not just from the PCIARC, but from other commissioners, other boards and commissions as well, in terms of what it would look like to undertake a review of our stipend policy. We have some boards and commissions that have no stipend at all, and have an advisory role to the mayor and the council, and then some that have varying stipend levels. So we've started undertaking the work of trying to do sort of a global
global review and understand the landscape of what our stipends look like right now, so that as we look to future budgets, we can think about what it would look like to not only equalize what the stipends look like, but make sure that it's commensurate with the work that we ask the various boards and commissions to do, since that varies on a board-by-board basis. Any follow-ups on that?
Thank you, Director Nix. For those who may be interested in joining the PCIARC, what does it take to become a commissioner?
You have to pass a background check. So I think, and you have to do a ride-along once a year. And then the time commitment.
Apply.
Yeah, apply for it, so.
Yeah, there's an oral interview.
Yeah. It's going on my 3rd year next year, I think, yeah, so.
3 of us.
Yeah, it's a 3-year commitment, and then they can extend it another 3 years, so.
And you will have to go through the Civilian Police Academy, which I would actually recommend, even if you're not interested in serving on the PCIARC. It's a really interesting experience to see how the St. Paul Police Department trains their officers and what subject areas are included. And that's another time commitment, right? It's, I think we have one going right now, and it's what, 11 Wednesdays?
Yeah, I think it's 11 or 12 Wednesday nights, correct?
Yeah, so that is a significant time commitment, but the learning that you'll get to be able to be more educated about how the St. Paul Police Department approaches the work is definitely worth the investment.
I would comment, if anybody's considering joining, I'm really proud to be on this commission. So I think the fact that one can contribute in such a substantial way is really worthwhile. If you're looking for something meaty and you can be proud of your work, I recommend that.
Thank you so much, Commissioners and Commander Peterson. I will now invite Chair Hayes to come back up to close us out.
Thank you very much. It was Commander Peterson.
Out of respect, I was going to sit out there for you. Yes.
No, you're. Thank you so very much for everybody who attended and for all of the millions of people who are watching us at home. I hope you found this interesting, informative. We would invite anyone who would like to come to a PCIARC meeting. We meet on the first Wednesday of every month at various community centers around the Twin Cities. You can come and hear the public portion. Obviously, case deliberations are closed to the public, but we're hoping to have many more interesting training topics and policy discussions. And I would be remiss if I did not say one more time, thank you to Vice Chair Forstrom for your 6 years of service on the PCIARC Commission. We appreciated all of your input. Do you want to say anything?
Well, now that you invited me, I suppose. Look, I think that of all the services that you could have in a city, policing is the easiest to criticize, and it's the most difficult to understand. And I think in that vein, we owe it to our fellow citizens and to our officers that protect us to spend some time learning about it. So it was mentioned here before, attending the Civilian Police Academy, which I strongly agree. Also, what you could do is you could request a ride-along with the City of St. Paul police officer. There is no better way to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly that officers go through on a day-to-day basis. Now, any officer will tell you that no two calls are different, and no two shifts no two calls are the same, and no two shifts are the same. As a PCIARC member, we have the opportunity to go on many ride-alongs, which has given us, in my opinion, an enormous amount of insight in the good, the bad, and the ugly. Having seen parents at their wits' end because their adult child who is a horrible, horrible problem with alcohol addiction, and they're in tears and they don't know what to do, and watching how an officer interacts with them, all the way to talking with someone whose son just died from a drug overdose, and experiencing things where an officer happens to stop because a kid smiled at him, and the officer stops the car, jumps out, pulls out a bag full of treats and animals and things, and spends 10
Not live
minutes-
animals, right?
What? Not real animals, sorry, stuffed animals. Treats and stuffed animals and other things for the child, just to spend 10 minutes with them and give them a different impression of the police, and how that can turn into not their one sibling that was there with them, but the 2 other siblings that were in the house that now came out to see what happened. You see that whole range of experiences that police officers go through every day. And it gives you an enormously profound appreciation for how difficult that role is, and how difficult as a community member it is to really be as critical as you are. And then finally, also recognizing that sometimes they get it wrong. Anybody in any job, no matter what you do, if you think you're reasonably good and you're somewhat proud of the role that you do, the thing that bothers you the most is people who do it poorly. And police officers are no different. And we provide I think, an important check to say, you know what, as a citizen, I don't think this officer did it correctly. And I think it's appreciated by the St. Paul Police. So it's been my privilege, it's been my honor to be on the commission, but I'm excited to turn it over to this wonderful group of people and the folks who come after me. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a great night and be safe.